Please welcome our next team, EVapp.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Robin, and my name is Eva, and we're here to talk to you about our smartphone application called EVapp, which stands for Emergency Volunteer Application. Now, what it does is it mobilizes medically trained volunteers to overlap the time between the occurrence of a heart attack and the arrival of the emergency services. Now, I want you to imagine a situation. It's Friday evening, and you're dining at a restaurant. And you're having a lovely time talking with friends, but 2 tables down, a man falls on the ground. He's unconscious. People are freaking out. Personnel rush to the scene, and they don't know what to do. And when the man remains unconscious, it becomes clear that this is very serious. His wife shouts, "Is there a doctor in the room?" But no one answers. Now we decided to take that phrase and make it mobile too. Is there a doctor in a nearby room? Now, let's visualize some numbers. In the US alone, every year, 360,000 people get a heart attack. Now, if we just take 50 of them, let's see what happens. 9% survives. Now, if we can only reach the people sooner and start CPR, let's see how many people survive. Pretty amazing, right? So out of those 360,000 people, just in the US, we can save up to 100,000 lives. But how does it actually work? You have a medical emergency, and you call 911, and they send out emergency services to reach you as soon as possible. Now, EVapp would be linked to 911, so you call 911, and they would call up our volunteers through the application that get there at an average of just 2 minutes. Now, in the US, the average response times go from 12 to even up to 15 minutes. Now, that 12 to 15 minutes is very important if you know that the survival rates drop every minute by 10%. So if you look at the 12 to 15 minutes, you're dead. Now, UK studies have shown if you want to reduce that average just by 1 minute, you would have to spend $80 million each year. But with us, we can reduce it to 2 minutes, and we would only ask 10% of that price.
So this is what the app looks like right now. We're hard at work with the development team. Right now it's in beta, and we're confident that it will be done by November. In the middle here, you can see what a volunteer would get when an alarm comes in on his phone. It's a very annoying sound, but you want it to be. He can accept the call, and then he gets directions to the place of the emergency, and he can also start a voice over IP call with the victim or a bystander to make sure that all the details are correct. Imagine you're in a building somewhere to find out where exactly they would be. On the left here, you can also see a very nice feature we've added. There's not just one person being called, there's actually two people getting the alarm, if possible. One goes directly to the scene to start CPR as fast as possible. Another person goes to find an automatic external defibrillator. You've probably seen these around buildings. They're coming up. So you can use the automatic external defibrillator to enhance the CPR. On the right there, a problem we've noticed with having an app like this is that doctors or nurses might not always want to be available for emergencies like this. So we've added in a schedule so they can schedule the times they want to be available to get an alarm. The green is just available, red is not available, and orange is only available when there's no one else around.
Now, what does the business model of the company actually look like? Well, obviously there's a very high need, high prevalence, high mortality rates for which we created our product, EVapp. And through volunteer organizations that make up about 20 of our partners, we have the ability to execute. We can bring the volunteers to the victims. Now, we're supported by, at the moment, University of Ghent and iMinds, But how will we create revenue? Now, we will do that by using 50% of government, 30% of pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and 20% from a more specialized service, let's say a sporting venue. Then when someone has a heart attack there, they wouldn't be called up or volunteer base, but just the first aid bases that are already on scene. Now, the timeline of the company, the business idea was formed in June 2014, and this year alone, we have already made a cooperation with our government for implementation and trials, which will be covered by them in the next year, as you can see, and our software development will be completed in November. So in 2016, we are starting trials, followed by a full release in Belgium. 2017, we're moving up to Norway, which has been prepared. 2018 and 19, we move up to Austria and Denmark, and by 2020, we will also be in Germany and Iceland. Now, in the bottom, you see the total population covered, and it rises really quickly, 16 million, and by 5 years, we're up to 110 million people covered.
So this is a graph of the financial plans we have, where we plan on being in the next 5 years. This includes $150,000 initial investment costs with development, etc. And this also includes a startup cost for each country, going legal fees, fact-finding, etc., of about $450,000 for smaller countries like Norway or Denmark, going up to $2 million for countries like Germany with 80 million people. This also includes a steadily growing staff of developers, salespeople, and a solid legal team. And the cost, the income we have there is based on the contract we have right now with the Belgian government. We're getting $400,000 for the trials, started when they start in February 2016, and we're getting $2 million each year of them once the product is rolled out in Belgium, starting 2017. Then the income for the other countries, which we're researching right now, is based on that number, the 2 million, and their population. I've put more specific numbers right here. They're on your handouts. If you want to ask questions about them later, we'll be happy to ask them, but I'm not going to go over them in detail right now. There's some competition in this market, but there's only 2 of them worth mentioning, really. There's PulsePoint out of California and SOS Alarm, which is based in the Netherlands. Something they don't take into account is something we value almost as much as saving lives of people who have heart attacks, and it's the privacy. We're talking about medical information, right? And not only medical information, you're talking about geographic data of your volunteers, which you want them to trust you. So we've made sure that in our system, no medical information is ever registered, and geographic location can never be tied to a person. Not ever. Not by government, not by our system administrators. Never. Another thing we really want to stress is that we're only using medically trained volunteers. We don't want anyone to show up at these scenes and try CPR and do something wrong. We're talking about doctors, nurses, paramedics, and people with a first aid degree only. Another thing we're very excited about, we've talked about it already a bit, which is the contract we have with 112, which is the 911 equivalent in Europe, to start integrating our service with their system as soon as the trials conclude. And also very important, the system is free for all users.
But let's meet the team. So we have Robin, one of our software engineers, Stephen, who has a master's in emergency medicine, and myself, majoring in medicine and an economics background. But as you can see, we're only a small part of the total team. Now, to point out a few, we have Thomas, which is the Secretary General of the Belgian Medical Association, also in his MD studies and has a legal background. In the middle, you see Koen Monsieur, which is a doctor and a professor in the University of Antwerp. And you have Johan, which is also completing his MD studies and has had a technological company for over 10 years. Now, altogether, we have a total combined medical knowledge of 95 years. Now let's look at some of our champions. Our champions include Microsoft, the European Resuscitation Council, and as mentioned, 112.
Oh, we're already done apparently. Now, panel, if you would look in this room, there's about 100 people here, right? If all of these people at one point in their life would have a heart attack, and would be waiting for the paramedics, only you guys would survive. Like the rest of the room would not survive their heart attack. With EVapp, we can do a lot better. So many lives each year are lost in medical emergencies that can easily be recovered from if only the ambulance or medical care would arrive just that little bit sooner. And we see governments investing huge amounts of money in trying to get that sum down, in trying to get that time down when someone who's able to help might just be around the corner. We're mobilizing doctors, trained volunteers, nurses to get there as soon as possible, to fill that vital gap of time where seconds can make all the difference.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great presentation, and you have a beautiful name, by the way. One question. What are the liability implications? So, can you talk a little bit? You said it's going to be trained professionals, but should something happen to me while you are trying to save my life and I die, can my family sue the company, or is it covered by the professional's insurance?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. We've thought about that. Two things. In Europe, the European population is far less litigious than in the US. We're still focusing on Europe right now. We might be moving to the US, but that's something for in more than 5 years. Another part is, imagine the system just being a person, right? Just being a person, seeing someone falling on the ground and knowing for some reason where a doctor is and running to the doctor and saying there's someone on the ground right there. Once the doctor has been alerted and says he will help by accepting the alarm, he does that. He doesn't do that automatically, you have to push a button. The liability goes over to the doctor, not to the company. So, yeah.
Have you actually have trained medical professionals on board who've actually signed on to this app, who have the app running on their, I mean, where are you at?
Do you mean where we at proof of concept?
Yeah, have you had medical professionals actually signed on to this and have an app or something, or a beta version running?
We already have a beta version running, which we can show you in just a few seconds. And to answer a second part of the question, we have about 20 partners, such as the Red Cross, who have a huge CPR volunteer database who have already signed up for the trials, which will be next year. And to show you for the trials, we have made a simple system of the app, which is, for example, on this phone, because we can't link it to 112 until the trials are completed. This would be a simplified version with just very simple alarm bell that would also call 112 and alert the volunteers inside the app for the moment. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yeah, I believe there's some gaps for me too, so you might have addressed this, but how do you populate your app with the medical volunteers who are willing to participate?
Yeah, so the situation in Europe right now is that the Red Cross does CPR training, not for doctors and nurses, but for the general population. They give a 6-month course for people who want to, and we've partnered with them, and they're going to promote the system to people that get the degree, so they can download the application, and we can be sure that we can provide good service and also good coverage.
And then as a volunteer, I'm accepting liability when I accept the assignment to help.
Well, yes, but in Europe, Europe is also already has what you call Good Samaritan laws. So if you try to help as a volunteer, you're not liable if something goes wrong.
And one other gap for me. It was curious to me. You're relying on 911, but not all calls are related to heart attacks. So, was that factored into your information you shared?
Yeah, we're focusing on heart attacks right now. We could be expanding to other medical emergencies, but as a system, not during the trials, but once it's actually integrated, it will be the dispatcher who can decide whether to call up a volunteer or not.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, I looked up the American company here, the Pulse Point,
Yeah.
and they're a nonprofit. So that this, as an idea, makes sense to me as a nonprofit. So, how are you going to make money doing this?
It's kind of a more complicated structure than that. EVapp itself is a non-profit, but there's a company behind it, which is called Prior IT. And what we do is we have a lot of partners which are members of the non-profit. I'm not sure if it's the same system in the US, but in Europe you have a VZW, in Dutch it's called, and like universities or the government can
An
invest.
NGO.
Yeah, NGO can invest in the non-profit or NGO, and then the non-profit will pay the company behind it for the licensing of the software.
Yeah, so could you flip back to your financial slide and actually show us how that works and beyond?
There we go. So this is just the costs. This is combined. We combined the non-profit and the company, but most of the profits will go to the company itself. So they get the money for making the software and also making the contacts with the countries, with additional countries. Yeah. Most of the money will go to the NGO. To the company.
They're both
Sorry.
owned by us. Maybe that wasn't clear. We just EVapp is a non-profit organization.
Yes, but the company behind it will get most of the money for the software.
Okay, so the actual money then comes from the government. We had I think you had like $400,000 in the first year from the Belgian.
Yeah.
Will come from the Belgian government. Okay, I got it. Okay, so a couple of questions from the audience. How many volunteers would you need on board to have a response time of 2 minutes, countrywide?
Well, we checked the numbers for Belgium, and in Belgium there are about 13,000 volunteers. And to cover Belgium as a whole, we would need only 3% of that to reach the average response time from 2 minutes.
3% of 13,000?
That's what our calculations say. But I must say for the trials, it is a smaller part of Belgium which will be covered. It's 2 provinces, so 2.5 million people. And because Belgium is very densely compact, it works out like that.
Got it. Let's see. Having a concern regarding privacy of the individual installing the app, it seems that the doctor or volunteer need to open the app all the time. I guess, does the app need to be running at all times?
Yeah, it has to be. And concerning privacy, I forgot to mention that we already have a go-ahead from the European Privacy Commission about the whole privacy issue. Doctor would have the app running in the background. We're working on, because it's very important that they keep the app running, we're working on getting the battery usage down and it being able to run in the background all of the time.
And the technological side of that, instead of unconsciously looking for a signal, the signal would only come in. He's the software engineer, but this is how they explained it to me, like a pop alert.
Got it. Let's see. What if people accidentally press the button in emergency services and call non-emergencies?
Well, yeah.
Countries charged for this.
Yeah, that's a good question. You have two kind of similar issues. What if someone presses the button accidentally, which would only be an issue in the test trials, because once we've integrated with 911, that's okay. That issue is solved.
The dispatcher gets the bed.
Yeah, and the other way around, if someone presses the button for a lark, 911 is automatically called, so you have the same legal issues for the one who's making a joke as you would just calling 911.
Right, and inside the app for the trials, maybe you can pass it around. It says swipe right to cancel. You have 3 seconds, to cancel.
Yeah.
We should pass it around.
Yeah, the alarm is going off. I think we've woken up a developer somewhere.
Okay, I think the rest of these you covered. I guess, what is your exit strategy? That's a good question here.
Yeah, so there's a few scenarios we're looking at. Right now, we're not looking to sell in the next few years, but one possible scenario would be a buyout from an insurance company or a pharmaceutical company, or even, if that would be possible, the European government.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.